Yeah, just everything. There's a lot of adventures that happen with that. I do quite a bit of a number of guys who second to jump on it. Sure.
Would you happen to know if that's a purpose-built plane for parachuting? I mean, I've never seen it quite.
This is a bomber.
That's just a straight out, all the way.
Yeah, they just made place inside where you put the guys in, and there's a little hatch up there. They crawl in and crawl out around the wing and slide down near the wing roots, you know, like these guys here. It's not as scary your aircraft. First successful military applications, the Germans, the Fallschirmjäger. These guys were fearless. Matter of fact, there's a friend of mine who's a Fallschirmjäger. He lives in St. Clair Shores. And using the 3rd parachute, the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Regiment who fought in Italy. He has made his, the Americans, in order to qualify for your wings, you have to make 5 free parachute descents. There you have to make 8, and then you earned your badge. And they have a different helmet. And something notoriously missing is their reserve parachute. But the deployment system is something there that the British and the Germans came up with a deployment bag system that's hooked up to your reserve. And what that does is when the canopy opens up, your parachute is S-folded in there, generally. So the first thing that comes out is your suspension lines, and then it begins to deploy your canopy. And then the air channel is exposed, and then the canopy opens up from the top to the bottom. And that's how this is. The opening shock is not bad. Whereas the other method, which I'll show you later on, veteran paratroopers I've known from World War II just say, yeah, I almost lost my fillings, you know, parachute opening up. And it opens up canopy first, then the suspension lines. And so you come to an abrupt stop and blowing out. But this one here, your exit is you call it Superman. You go out like this. Your feet are planted on the door of the aircraft, and you lunge yourself out this way. You put yourself in a position so that your canopy can open up. So you're not tumbling around. You're just generally going straight out, and it takes 3 to 4 seconds for that canopy to open up. But the problem comes. No, I don't have a picture of it. You don't have risers. As I talked about risers to control, you don't. This right over here, and it's hooked onto the side, is 2 lines that come up, and there's a focal point. You have no risers. You have no control over your descent. So you're like, you know, milkweed, little fuzzy things, how they deploy their seeds, and the wind blows them all over the place, and pretty much that's what you're like. You can jump at a lower altitude. Today, the combat altitude is for jumping is 500 feet, but you can deploy this type of parachute between 300 and 400 feet, if need be. The aircraft you're jumping from is called the Ju-52. It's originally was designed to be an airliner. But the Germans said it was going to be an airliner, but they're designing a bomber. But it was in that gray area between wars, and so they were designing their Air Force, their Luftwaffe. And so this aircraft was not fit to be a bomber by the time World War II rolled along, but it was a 3-engine transport aircraft. And so you can carry upwards of 24 jumpers. And we worked on a static line system. This is the static line. This is hooked into the aircraft, and this will automatically deploy that parachute for you. You just do the Superman thing, and you're good. And this is your risers comes up, so it comes from here up, over, and to a certain point, and you can try to influence the direction. The paratroopers they had padded gloves that came up to here, and you had knee pads, because you didn't have a parachute landing foam. You're landing on your hands and knees. And this was, the Germans conducted combat parachute jumps in Norway, in Holland in 1940, in Russia, and most notably in 1941 in the island of Crete. That was the last time they actually deployed troops by parachute, because you have a problem here is you don't have your weapons with you, because it's hard to jump with all this paraphernalia and weapons. So they had a weapon container. It was a canister about so tall, and in it was your weapons and ammunition. You may have had ammunition with you, but it was very difficult to have weapons with you. And so you were separated. You land, okay, and you're being shot at in Crete by New Zealanders, and you can't get your weapons. And once the New Zealanders found out where the weapon canister is, they would just sit there, and every time a German tried to get to them, they'd pick them off. So casualties were very high in Crete, and Hitler said, "Oh, we're not doing this anymore."
Didn't they have a very successful raid in Holland?
Yeah, in 1940, yeah, they secured
Secured fortress in
Afghanistan.
I don't remember the name, but they did have
Yeah, there's well, that'll bring me into gliders. But the whole idea of using specially trained troops, like with the application for parachute troops or glider troops, specially trained troops, you don't need big numbers in many cases, but they're used to hold strategic ground areas. Like in Holland, there's a lot of bridges because it's a lot of streams and rivers in there. And then the Belgians and the Dutch relied upon these waterways to create natural barriers for defense. But okay, we've got a way to bridge that, and so you have to use parachute troops to secure the bridges, and then you have follow-on troops that now you've got to capture the bridge before the Dutch can blow it, and the armored units, panzer units that come through and cross the bridge and move on, along with armor has to have infantry with it, and so they would have these panzer grenadiers and also tanks, and they were able to bridge all these obstacles, and the Dutch had no defense for that, so they pulled it up in a matter of days. Belgium was the same way. There's what he's referring to, there's a fortification that was built in the 1930s, and it was deemed invincible. Everyone looked at it and there's no way you can take this fortification. It's called Eben Emael. And Eben Emael, the fort itself was massive and deep and had gun turrets, and it was near the Maas River. And you had to go through, from Germany, you had to go through a little bit of Holland to get to the Maas River and get into Belgium. And by that time, they can see you and they can blow the bridges. And you have that waterway defense there. You have parachute troops, you scatter them all over the landscape, and it takes a while to reorganize and execute the mission. And this is something rather unusual. Hitler came up with this idea. You know? Probably one and only good idea he had. And so there was a German by the name of Kurt Studer, who was a German general, and he was a Luftwaffe, the Air Force. He was in the Army before, and then changed over to the Air Force. And by then they were training in gliders. They were training these glider guys, which later became your fighter pilots. And so they went in, and he called student in Berchtesgaden there in the Sibirhal, and went through the whole idea. And he said, "I've got this idea. There's something we're thinking about, you know." And he came up with the idea of using gliders. And so this is May 10th, 1940. The Blitzkrieg in the lowlands didn't start yet. This was going to kick it off. So they got these guys, there's 8 guys in a glider, and they were trained. These guys had no idea what they're training for. Mushrooms, you call them, kept in the dark, set on, you know, wise ideas. And so the gliders would come in, and they don't make any noise. And in the early morning hours, they come in, and they were trained. They had the glider pilots were among the best in Germany. They were selected for this job. They used airborne engineers who were working with explosives. The Germans came up with the shaped charge idea. It's It's like a cone shape, and then with the force of the explosion, it centers on a certain one area, small area, and that will penetrate steel. And so they had two different types of shaped charges. And when detonated, it focuses the blast on one part that penetrates steel, which turrets, gun turrets were made out of. So you can disable the guns systematically. So in the interim part, before the actual invasion, before the actual assault, they were gathering as much intelligence as possible. So the town of Eben Amal, they collected postcards, and even the German airmail, the Ju-52s that were flying mail from Germany to Holland, flew over, and they had a camera inside there. And they took pictures of the fort. They had created aerial photography at that point. And they were looking at it, and they said, well, it's huge. And they were, they had to be, I mean, there had to be landmines and booby traps and everything all over it. And so on one of the overflights, they saw the Belgian soldiers playing soccer on it. They said, okay, there's no mines there. So that was all intelligence that they put together. They had already taken the Sudetenland and the area between the Czech Republic and Germany. And the Czechs had all these bunkers, a very strong defensive system. But when Nerval Chamberlain gave the Sudetenland to Hitler, you know, he circumvented the whole idea of these fortifications. So right away, the Germans had these without firing a shot. So they used these shaped charges, and they experimented on these bunkers and these fortifications down in Czechoslovakia, and learned how to blow them up and how to actually use these charges. So the time came, these guys had no idea what they were going to do, and then they're training for a hypothetical mission, and they have no idea that this fort even exists. And for navigational purposes, they took all these searchlights and had them pointing up, and that marked the flight path. And when you got the searchlights to the German border, then they stopped. That was the release point. So you're not crossing into, I don't know why they'd be concerned about it, but you're not entering the airspace of that sovereign country. So the aircraft comes up, releases the glider, and then turns around, still staying in German airspace, and the glider comes in. And based on the rate of descent, they were able to come in, and they knew about how many seconds before you have to execute another turn. They came through, and the glider pilots came in, and the gliders would land almost on top of their objective. So you had, in essence, 88 German airborne engineers landing on a fortification which has a little over 2,000 Belgian soldiers, artillerymen, they're not infantrymen. So their ability to defend from the top side was not very effective. The gliders come in and land. Now, I mentioned Murphy's Law before. If anything can go wrong, it will. The commander of that task force, a major, his tow rope broke. So his glider went down in Germany. So he sent another officer on a bicycle, go back to the airfield and get another aircraft in there. And while he's doing that, they cleared the landing zone for the aircraft. He landed down to the battlefield, but he landed late. But when you have troops like this quality, that they're trained, if one person, if the commander is not there, then you understand the commander's intent and you execute the mission. It doesn't mean, okay, well, we can't do it now. No, you're going to do it. The had good NCOs and the junior officers, everyone knew exactly what they're going to do, and they did it. So even without the commander, they were able to execute their mission. And they neutralized all the artillery gun turrets, which were designed to knock out those bridges across the Maas River. So you take them out of the equation, you neutralize this whole fortification that was invincible, you just neutralized it. And then when the elements came through, they had glider troops who secured the bridges. So the bridges belonged to the Germans, fortification is neutralized, and the Germans were able to go right in there. And Belgium didn't last more than a week.
Was this at night?
It was early morning hours.
I'm just trying to think of dead reckoning or glider like that. I mean, wow.
Yeah, by the time they landed on top of the glider, it was close to 6 o'clock in the morning. But the lights were,
Right.
everything was brilliant, it was well orchestrated. And you get into something like this where you have special troops, you don't need a massive army. You have a small, well-trained unit, and they can neutralize a much larger force. So, sir.
I seem to recall a story about Max Schmeling, the boxer. The
Yeah.
German boxer was a paratrooper and refused to jump in Crete.
Well,
He said he didn't feel well. Refused to
Well, it's
jump.
just, I mean, you have to get over certain fears.
Yeah.
Jumping out of an airplane isn't a normal thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's just called, it's an internal self-preservation, mechanism in your body. You're not gonna, you don't do this if you want to grow up in retirement age. You don't do this other stuff. So, but Max Schmeling, by the way, he lost to Joe Louis, and he did jump. He jumped into Crete. He's a big guy too.
You know, it was estimated that more German paratroopers were actually killed by Cretan civilians than were killed by the Aussies and the New Zealand, the British. All over Crete, and I've been to Crete many times, there's memorials and villages everywhere where the men rose up and attacked the Germans with flintlock rifles and World War I rifles,
And
swords.
he couldn't get to the weapon.
They never made another drop after that.
Yeah, no, this is the end of it. You're right.
Yeah.
In Herculon, there was
Yeah.
an airfield there that had to be. The whole idea was seizing an airfield and have follow-on troops come in, and that's the key to a lot of airborne operations. Seeing the success of the Germans, the British came up with a system here. Once again, no reserve parachute. You had a QRB over here, quick release box, a mechanism designed to get out of the parachute quickly, the harness. I have Americans adapted it later on after Normandy. So it's a quarter turn, you hit it, and it comes apart. Nickname in the Army of dial of death, but the fear was that it will open up and then you open your parachute and your parachute's up there and you're going down here. And it never happened. There's safety precautions against that. But they had leg bags, so all your equipment was essentially in this leg bag. So when you exited the aircraft, you just pushed out with your right leg, and you had that bag on it, and you didn't have a reserve, so you didn't do this. You just held onto it and stayed vertical. And as you came out, you opened it up, and then you dropped that. You lowered that. You had a pin you pulled, and it lowered it, and that landed before you did. So, sir.
Do you, so did the British Airborne divisions, do you think they would put like a Sten machine gun there? Because I don't think that can hold a Lee Enfield rifle.
No, they would have, a lot of them, they did have stems, and they would put it in the webbing across to them, right across here. Good observation. Yeah, Lee Enfield would be tough to carry. But they did. I did have a weapons case for a Lee Enfield. You jump it, and it would be right alongside of you. You went in, you had your arm around it. It was real thick felt, and it went down. So you went barrel first and receiver. And you jumped like this. You had your arm around it, and then you could lower it. The interesting thing, I've known several British parish, and they, the training for these were, they had a bomber, like a Whitley bomber, and they had a hole. And so everyone's sitting around it, and you had a number, 1, 2, 4, and then you push yourself up and you had to keep straight. If you went like this, your nose would hit the other side, you ricochet in there, you'd still get out. But you're hooked up right over it, so you'd fall through and your static line would open you up and you'd open it up. And the helmets, like these, there's foam rubber that went around like this. That was for training. You don't want to ricochet in that little channel. But later on, they copied the German helmet, this very small pot that fit on your head. Okay. Finally, Americans get into the game. And in July 1940, the Army wants to experiment with a technique for deploying soldiers from the air, vertical envelopment once again. And they had a test platoon from the 29th Infantry Regiment. They had 40 guys that said, yeah, I want to do this, or I'll try it. And so they were all volunteers, and in the finest traditions of the Airborne, you have to volunteer. You have to sign a sheet of paper saying, yeah, I want to be a paratrooper. They won't make anyone, you know, a paratrooper unless you volunteer. The easy part is getting in. The hard part is staying. And this type of parachute here, this is called a T4 parachute. So the reserve is actually part of the harness that you got. So it's part of it. It's not a separate piece that's added to the harness once you're in. The boots are, well, I got a pair of World War II jump boots over there. They're high. They were designed to be high and give you support for the ankles, which really wasn't really needed later on because I used to jump in jungle boots. But they're the concept for anything to protect the feet. As long as you keep your feet and knees together, you know, go for it. You know, you'll be all right. But the jump uniform was made out of balloon cloth, they called it. It was had a very high sheen to it, and it was like coveralls that you put on. And they didn't have a helmet, so they had a flight helmet that they would just put on, so it didn't help very much. But we're learning how these things work. The T4, the whole container would rip off and pull out the canopy. It took some doing to take the only parachutes we had were emergency devices for aviators, a way of self-preservation, and taking something and then turning into a true parachute where you didn't have to worry about pulling a ripcord grip. So they actually hooked it in, and you had a static line that was part of the whole thing. And this is a World War II static line. And you had a snap hook that hooked on an anchor cable in the aircraft. The first jump aircraft were B-18 bombers. And then later on, they took transports and they modified them. But there's an anchor cable that ran through the length of the aircraft. This goes over on top of it, and then you pull it down, and heard that click. It will not unhook. And then this is on your, this would come across, and this would be over on top of your parachute. And this is, once you fall, this length, that would open up your parachute. So this is it's a heavy cotton webbing, and this is hooked to the panel on the back of the parachute. This is what would fall 15 feet. It opens up, it rips off the back of the panel, and your canopy opens up. These guys here, they made they made 5 qualifying jumps, and this happened on August 16th, 1940. 1940. That's the birthday of the Airborne. First military jump out of an aircraft, August 16th, 1940. And it was obviously successful. They didn't lose anybody. They actually had a jump refusal. The guy said, I'm not doing this. So, okay. You're a leg now. You're not airborne. You're not Indian. That's it. By the end of the day, he's off somewhere else. Return to unit, RTU. And the first guy out of the aircraft, first officer, is a lieutenant by the name of Red Ryder. It was William Ryder, but his nickname was Red because it was a cowboy, Red Ryder. So that was his nickname, Lieutenant Ryder. He was the first officer to jump out of an aircraft. And the first enlisted guy was a PFC named Red King. I guess red is a good color. And they just went out. And the whole idea about saying Geronimo, things like that, you've seen all, cartoons and everything else. The whole idea was one guy is Aubrey, can't think of his last name, but he wanted, everyone said, you're scared as hell when you jump out of an airplane. He just, it's this thing about bravado, took the paratroopers, you're not afraid of anything. So he says, no, he said, I'll tell you what, I'll have the presence of mind to say Geronimo when I left the aircraft. The whole idea of Geronimo was to prove he wasn't scared. So guys who jump out of aircraft do not say Geronimo. That's the legend of the word Geronimo associated with parachutes. None is wrong. They created this, out of this test platoon, 40 volunteers, you had expanded the whole idea and you created the 501st Battalion right there. And that was roughly 800 guys, and that was the whole thing. And so we had to write the book right away. This is 1940, and we're trying to figure out how to use these guys. The Air Force wanted them, the Army wanted them. They had different names for them, but they finally came up with paratroopers, thank God. Some of the names were really. And these guys here, once you had, this is all before Pearl Harbor. So now we're in war after December 7th. And so they started expanding this whole idea. The Marines wanted parachutes too. So they had 2 parachute battalions, but they never used them. Eventually they took those guys and said, we're not doing this stuff, particularly in the Pacific. So they integrated these guys into regular infantry units. There was a number of them ended up on Iwo Jima at some point. They had the jump wings, but they never jumped after that.
Did they train in the Army program, or did they have a separate training program?
They took the Army program and they trained them in Lakehurst, New Jersey, where the Zeppelins left them burnt. That was their training area. Sir?
Is this paratrooper in the middle standing at ease? Is that the
This
position?
guy here?
Yeah.
So he's checking the guy's parachute. This began the tradition, and it just within July of '43, actually before that, we started using them in combat. So in a short period of time, we just pulled this whole thing together, and we're writing the book on how to use parachute troops, our doctrine. And literally, within a couple of years, we're actually committing troops, parachute troops, into combat. Okay? The 509th jumped into North Africa, Algeria, Morocco. They flew all the way nonstop from Great Britain to northern, to Morocco, French Morocco, and dropped there. It didn't work out. Sure.
You mentioned that the fabric would have sheen to it.
Yeah.
Any purpose for that? Or water
No, just they were experimenting. As I just said, they're just trying to figure out how they're going to do this. Sure.
So was the first American drop, was that in Algeria?
Yeah, the first combat jump, yeah. The 509th Parachute Infantry Battalion. Jump school consisted of 4 weeks, and none of them were easy. A lot of it was physical conditioning. This is what we refer to as suspended agony. This is you're hanging on a canopy for a long period of time. It's very uncomfortable. But you're learning how to control the canopy by slipping and learning the whole concept. And in between that, you do a lot of running and a lot of push-ups. And the whole idea is building upper body strength, but also airborne troops are known for being in exceptionally good physical condition because of the nature of our job. Drop you there, you've got to be able to take care of yourself. And so that's always the hard part. The first one is ground training, and that's a lot of running, 6-mile runs, every day. And then tower training was, you had a 34-foot tower with cables, so you get accustomed to, and this is just, believe it or not, this is where you have most of your jump refusals, a 34-foot tower. and you're hooked onto cables that would, you roll down these cables and you get the whole idea of what you're doing, and you had to react. You count 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, and you check canopy, gain canopy control, and you're doing all this while you're moving. It simulates the aircraft moving, and you're jumping out. And we've had people at 34 feet, the ground's right there. Sometimes you can get over it, sometimes you can't. And if you can't, sorry, you're out of the program. You have to make these jumps, and there's a grader down there grading you on your exit door. And if you don't meet the standards, you aren't going any further. And jump leak and then parachute packing. You were always trained, World War II, trained to pack your own parachutes, and you had to jump your parachutes too. So, but they did away with this. Now it's ground leak tower, you can jump leak. Make your 5 jumps over there, slap the wings on you, give your orders, and get out of here. It's a proud moment. When I graduated from jump school, I was 38 years old. I went through all this. I wasn't 21. Yeah, I was 38. I was the 5th oldest out of 320. All the old folks, this is for your benefit here. The oldest was a 55-year-old major, and all of us older folks, there was no problem. Well, it was an ordeal, but we all made it. The people that didn't make it were the 18 to 21-year-old age group, a lot of cold refusals. And it was, I'm going to get on a soapbox here, our society makes it acceptable for people to quit. It's okay. We have 2nd place, 3rd place, 4th place trophies. You have only 1 place here, 1st place. 2nd place is called the first loser. So it's a different attitude, and we coddle. I'm a parent too. I used to have my daughter do push-ups or something. But it's okay to give up. So we have people saying, and we have the black hat instructor say, you don't have to put up with this crap. Give up. Well, you don't have to do this stuff. Running 6 miles, who wants to run 6 miles? So if they'll give up here, they'll give up on the battlefield. You don't want them there. That's why when things get a little interesting, 82nd Airborne, 18 hours after notification, they're on the way to the objective. That's anywhere in the world, anytime, any place, anybody. Simultaneously, as far as deploying troops on the battlefield, we have parachute troops who can, people will exit an aircraft, high-performance aircraft at basically a lower altitude successfully. The Army came up with a program based on what the Germans were doing, using gliders, non-powered flight, towed to the landing zones. And here, you have different types of troops. In parachute troops,